All right. My name is Celius. I am a graduate student that just graduated and taken this intro to film class, and I'm here with my boss, Don Umland, who is a big Star Wars fan.
Big nerd.
And we are going to talk about Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. My first question is definitely, what do you think of like this movie as a whole? I mean, like the whole character development, the plot, and like just the whole story in general.
Well, you got to remember, Chris, this is all built on the premise of what, George Lucas's vision back in the 70s, which seems like forever and a day ago, but because it was, of, creating this 9-episode story that he starts in the middle with 4, 5, and 6, which sets the basis for the prequels, which obviously takes you to 7, 8, and 9, which you're concentrating on 7, but without 4, 5, and 6 setting the basis of Skywalker and Anakin and Vader and Obi-Wan, and you don't have 7 without what 4, 5, and 6 and the prequels did. Yeah. So, as a 12-year-old back when this first film came out, and the dynamics of making sci-fi relevant to people to watch, because it really wasn't what it, that film and others like Alien and others blew up science fiction. And so at the end of the day, you have a good versus evil, or cowboys versus Indians type of spaghetti western battle in space. And then you bring it into what, Episode 7, Force Awakens, and now you've revealed characters that are that are the future of Luke and Leia and that whole cast of characters, which we do get some of them in this film. I mean, it's not like they completely disappear. But you don't have a great Episode 7 without Lucas's vision of 4, 5, and 6, and then some argue 1, 2, and 3 weren't as good, and some argue 7, 8, and 9 weren't as good because, Disney. I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons that people could argue that they weren't as good as the originals. Well, we all know that usually the originals are the best.
That's very true.
Yeah, but it still completes his 9-episode, and think about all the spin-offs we've had off of it. But at the end of the day, what did 7 do for me? Well, first of all, it rehooks a guy like me and who was a young teenager back into this world 30, 40 years later to equally enjoy, to see what the finish of the story is going to be. And I think the introduction of Rey and Kylo Ren, that they are extensions of the family tree, and how this is going to play out with obviously other characters influencing them, as ghost figures, which ironically Luke had a ghost figure in Obi-Wan in 6. So there is obviously a power to the Force that comes into play that says that those, like Yoda became a ghost figure, Obi-Wan became a ghost figure, that there are still relevant figures that can reach out and be Force present to influence their lives, So, yeah, it had a great influence because I got to see what the culmination, or the start of what the culmination was going to be in 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah, I think for me it kind of points the same thing. I mean, at least like growing up with like these different movies and being just like complete nerd about it, it like sets that narrative of just like starting off with the basis and then obviously creating like a whole family tree, a whole lineage, and stuff like that. And obviously I saw like the difference between like obviously Luke and Rey. I think for me when it comes to that is, what do you think is like the big difference between Luke and Rey? Because obviously like Luke was head on of like just accepting his journey, while like Rey was struggling like a little bit.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
I mean, they both have similar paths because they're both trying to discover themselves and know what their families are like. Because you're right, Luke has an assumed family because he has Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, who he just thinks of as family. Rey has a family, but she can't remember it.
Yeah.
You know, that she's too young. I mean, there's very fuzzy elements. So they both come out of sordid pasts of not really knowing who they are and what they're, you know, because what does Luke dream of? He leaves, you know, I want to leave the farm and I want to go fight for the, you know, for, you know, for everything that's good. And Rey is a little more of a lost character because she's lost her parents at such a young age that she's kind of just kind of roaming out there, and so she needs a calling. Well, clearly the calling comes to her, no different than what it did for Annie. I mean, he's a little kid that knows that he's special,
yeah,
and knows that he wants to do something cool. It just needs the right person to go and guide him. Well, ironically, Luke gets that, Annie gets that, Rey gets that, but that's what's supposed to be, you know, that's the power of the Force. And what Episode 7 does is that, you know, it revitalizes the franchise. You know, we fast forward several years after Episode 3 is finished to finish this.
Yeah.
So the franchise has kind of been sitting idle, you know, gets a re-energized with these new characters. Very exciting. And then they throw in the fact that, you know, you start out very basic in terms of what special effects were, which were pretty cool because George Lucas created what was the Industrial Light and Magic. And then you expand it now with CGI that we saw come emerging in 7, 8, and 9. And it just brings all this to life. So.
Yeah. When it comes to obviously different like character development, I mean it truly shows because each character has like a struggle within themselves, whether it's like physical, mental, or just like spiritual. And I feel like in this movie specifically, I saw it in Rey. It was just kind of like a growing moment for them.
Well, that was something that was a bit of a concern.
Yeah.
There was a lot of comparisons to Episode 4, Star Wars: A New Hope. Like the films were almost too similar, and they are. But I think it's intentionally done to pattern that Rey and Luke's lives they're going to intersect, but they also have similar patterns of growth, you know, and finding themselves, which is something that you mentioned. So, yeah, they were similar, but I think that's intentional, and you kind of have to accept that fact.
One question that I've been thinking about is, as we know that Finn's journey as like a stormtrooper has been like a challenge for him. What do you think has been like the breakthrough for them through it all, and how do you think their character within has changed?
Finn is an interesting character because, you know, the way he has to break away from being a stormtrooper,
yeah,
effectively, and which seems odd because what made his specific stormtrooper makeup breakaway versus anybody else's? Well, we do come to find out that there are other ones that call them defects. You never really get to know, but there are others like him that find the influence to be good. So you have the character development, you know, because initially in 7, and we obviously know how it plays out, but in 7 he's like, I don't know if I can do this, and then he wants to run away at some point, which, you know, we see in characters in 4, 5, and 6. You know, Han Solo kind of has his own mission in life, and what does he want to do at specific times? Well, go back to just, you know, gun running and be a renegade, and Finn is like trying to figure himself out. But then you always wonder, does he see Rey as a love interest? You never really know.
It's like a
Yeah, well, and then other characters come in to be that care for. It's like, is there just a bond? Does he truly love her? Does he love her like a sister? You know, just wants to protect her. But he feels a calling to not go a different direction, that he's driven to help her. And I think that's the character development that we start to see get built in Episode 7.
Yeah. Obviously, like during the film, like I could see like different like patterns within like the setting, the plot. I mean, obviously like the different lighting as well. I mean, like as someone that like kind of knows the difference between different lighting, different sets, and stuff like that. How does this version of it compare to like older movies that like you've seen before?
Well, I think there's two ways to answer it. We always see that there's great direction, the light, the dark. You see some great scenes sometimes when, like Luke in episode 5, and you get this brief split division of his face where it's light over here and dark over here, and Vader's talking to him in the background, and you can see, that's a great use of light to show that if a person's divided, which route do I go? And then obviously the lighting of, the sabers have specific colors, because we know they have crystals in them, that different colors represent different things. I think there's, when you can get scenes, everything with Vader is dark, that's intentional, obviously. But it's interesting, what color are the stormtroopers? They're white. And, so you wonder, like, okay, here's this evil, supposed to be the evil empire. Well, we see them get created in 1, 2, and 3, and how they were created. So I think there's very intentional uses of light. Because remember, in 3, they were supposed to be good until General Order 66 is executed, and then they become evil. So I think there's very intentional uses of light. And then obviously in 7, 8, and 9, you've got the advantage of CGI and computer imagery and making things so vivid. But I think he carries that. I mean, that's carried through in anything that has good versus evil, is when it's well done, is you use your lighting to its greatest benefit. Is that everything you got for me?
That's all for today.
Well, before we hang up, behind you, you got a block. We have to at least say we have an influence of Vader back here, and then you talk about the lighting. You have, good versus evil and what these things represent. So we can't go without me having the use of that. But I appreciate the opportunity to talk about one of my favorite films.
Thank you.
You're welcome.